Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. Every company has a story to tell, from the small startup to the large enterprise, and everything in between. This is one of them. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
Marco.
Sean.
Have you seen that little bugger?
That bot?
That bot. It's running around like crazy.
What do you mean? I thought we got rid of it.
Well, no, it's one we like.
Oh, the good one?
It's a good one, but it turned rogue. I don't know.
Oh, so there are good and bad?
See, there it is again. It's just there. Now it's doubled. There's two of them.
Didn't we have a conversation about bots, the good and the bad one last year?
Good, the bad, and the ugly. There may be some pretty ones too. I know we didn't talk about pretty ones, but I'm sure they're out there. But yeah, we did have a good chat with our friends at Imperva, and they produce a report, the Bad Bot Report, I think is what it's called officially. Yeah, we actually had 2 episodes where we talked through the findings of the research, right? What's real traffic? What's made by humans? What's traffic made by bots? What are bots for? Can they be good? Can they be bad? What makes them ugly? And this year, more research on that front and some changes, which we're going to talk about. The impact of business is real and escalating, and the resulting impact on humanity is very clear as well. And we're gonna dig into some of that, and hopefully the bots don't take over this conversation today. Maybe we can keep it mostly human.
You never know. I remember from
Never
last
know.
year's conversation, I've learned so many things that I had no idea. I've always been thinking about some little string of codes that do something, but then the way that affects society and business and our everyday life when we shop online, it kind of blew my mind. So I'm kind of curious to see if we're in a better shape, but I don't know. I have some doubts about it. Let's find out.
maybe the ugly ones are doing better. We'll see. But clearly, Marco, we have no idea about this topic and what's going on. It takes a set of skilled engineers to really understand where things are happening, and even more importantly, connection to real environments in the business to get some insights of what's actually going on there as well, and bringing that through the report and other direct hands-on insight from the field comes Ryan Wyndham, VP of Application Security at Imperva. Ryan, thanks for joining.
Thanks, Sean and Marco. Thanks for having me.
And just to check quickly, you're not a bot.
I'm not a bot. I'm here in the flesh today.
You're here in the flesh. All right. So the Q&A is with a real human. No pop-up bots here. And for those listening, and obviously we met you before we started recording, but it was a first time meeting you, and we want to give our audience an opportunity to do the same. So maybe a quick view into your journey into your current role, and why you like looking and talking about bots so much.
Great. Well, thank you guys for having me on your show. So I've been in the application security and application delivery space for, I guess, about 20 years now or so. So I started at WebSense, if you guys remember WebSense, Secure Web Gateway Company, and was later at F5 Networks, where I ran the security portfolio over there. And even did some early stage stuff. I was CEO of a company called Sodexis, which was doing kind of next generation application delivery for cloud native applications, and they were acquired by Citrix back in 2018. And now I'm over at Imperva, working with some colleagues that I've worked with in the past, having a good time, and focused on a lot of really fraud use cases now, which is what a lot of this bot activity ends up amounting to. And so, Marco, as you were saying, there really is a huge cost, not only to end users and the vendors that are attacked, but also just society at large. We all end up paying the cost here. So Looking forward to this conversation.
Absolutely. Looking forward to that, and an invite to people that maybe they want to hear what was the conversation about last year. They can do so, of course, on ITSP Magazine. And, fairness, there may be people that want to have a clarification about what is a bot. Let's start from the beginning. What is and why are they bad and why are they good, if there are any good left, and why they're ugly?
Yeah. So it's a great place to start. So, very simply, bots are software applications that run automated tasks, basically. And so, we like to think about them as being, good or bad, right? So there are good bots that are out there that are doing things like, so you have a website and there's a, search engine bots that are crawling your website so that your website can be found, right? Or there could be aggregators that are looking at hotel and airfare prices, and they're kind of going around and scraping those and helping you find the best deal on your next vacation. And those are actually a source of distribution for the airlines and the hotels as well. So they appreciate those. But there's a lot of bad bots out there as well, more than we would like, and that number unfortunately is is increasing, right? So bad bots are basically, bots that are abusing or misusing websites and web services, and in many cases, they're actually committing, online fraud. And we can talk about kind of the different types of, attacks that these bots are carrying out. But basically, they're emulating real browsers. They're imitating real user behavior in many cases, and so they're very difficult to detect. And when you combine the fact that there's also good bots out there, it's really hard. What's a human? What's a bot? And if it's a bot, is it good or is it here to do harm? So it's a hard problem to solve.
So Ryan, is it always the case that a bot is trying to do something that a human would normally do, just at scale, perhaps with better precision, or are there things that bots can do that aren't possible by human beyond just the scaling part of it?
Yeah, well, so if you think about the way that traditional attacks have taken place, non-bot attacks, right? They will essentially exploit software vulnerabilities, right? And so bots are different because they are actually behaving the way that a human would. So in the kind of in our industry, we talk about business logic attacks, right? So they're actually using the application the way that a human would use it. They're just doing things that the operator of the site wouldn't want them to do. So typically it's human emulation, browser emulation, that sort of thing.
I know Marco wants to go somewhere with it, but one more quick question, because a bot, is it bad by design or is it good by design? Can it be built for good and then accidentally turn bad, or can a good one be manipulated to be bad? Maybe kind of
Yeah,
describe that a bit.
no, I mean, typically, they're built for a particular case, but a lot of the same underlying infrastructure is used, whether it's used for, good purposes or bad purposes. When what you'll see, I don't know if you guys remember, maybe 10 years or so ago, around that time frame, just as there became kind of a market almost for DDoS attacks, right? There now has become, a market now for bots as a service. And that market is actually operating more in clear daylight because there are plenty of reasons why someone would legitimately want to use a bot. Some of those reasons that I mentioned before. But those services are actually also being used by those who have nefarious intent. Who may want to take over a user account in order to steal personal information, or maybe use the payment information that's saved within that user account, or in the case of airlines or hotels or other kind of the travel industry. There's loyalty points and things like that that could be spent or transferred. So we see a lot of that, and we see a lot of price scraping as well, particularly in kind of the e-commerce domain, in order to kind of get that marginal price improvement to direct traffic to a competitor's site because of the better price and so on.
So, as we will go, I guess, really soon into what happened in this report, we're talking about these bad bots. And the thing is, they're not created all equal. There are some are a little bit worse than the other. Are we all going to put them in jail and throw the keys? Or there are some that are going to get away with a ticket? So I know that you have a classification. I'm making it fun, but they're classified by you guys according to how much damage, I guess, they can bring. Can you define that for us?
Yeah, so we've broken down the bot activity really into three main categories. So there are, simple bots, and these are bots that are basically just leveraging scripting technology, like curl. And so they don't necessarily attempt to emulate a browser. They're very basic. They typically have kind of singular functions. They're pretty easy to detect as a result. A lot of times they don't process JavaScript, for example. So if you challenge them with some JavaScript, they won't respond the way that a full browser would. Those are simple bots, and those are relatively easy to identify. Then there's a class that is kind of in between. We call them moderate. And those typically are built on the frameworks that a lot of developers are using now to automatically test their web services. So an open source example would be like Puppeteer, right, or Selenium. So these are tools that are out there that are designed explicitly for testing purposes to look like a real browser, and they essentially are headless browsers, right? And so those ones are a little bit more difficult to detect. And then there's what we call advanced bots, and in these cases, not only do they present as actual browsers and behave when challenged as an actual browser, but they also try to emulate human behavior, right? So the way that a person would move a mouse on a web page, or the rate at which they would kind of go through a page, and the scrolling and the paths that they would take. And so these are much more difficult to detect, because obviously they present the way a browser and a human would. And as these bot networks are getting more sophisticated, and as kind of bots as a service, as I was saying, is becoming more professionalized, they're recruiting bots from a wider and wider network. And so a lot of these attacks end up coming in. You may have heard the term, low and slow, right? So, if you're doing a bot attack and you only have so many hosts, those hosts have to send a lot of requests. If you're spreading them over a lot of different hosts that are on different residential IP networks, those could come in. In fact, we saw one attack that was I think 9 million hits in about 15 minutes, but it came in over a very distributed set of end users. So it's tough to pick up in that respect.
So where and how do they present themselves? Because I know in the report, I believe that it shows a rise in the number of bad bots, and so I'm wondering how and where do they present themselves? Is it there are more bots, or the bots are more active, or there are more targets to hit, so that raises the value of what you're monitoring. So kind of describe what you're seeing there, and perhaps connect it back to previous reports to kind of say where things are headed.
Yeah, so things unfortunately are getting worse. We're seeing more of those advanced bots that we talked about that are evasive and emulate human behavior. They're more difficult to detect. And I think what's driving a lot of this is just naturally more and more services are moving online. I mean, there's been a big trend toward that, obviously, in digital transformation over the last decade or so, but it's really been accelerated by the pandemic and other kind of remote situations. So I think the stakes are higher. I think the attackers have gotten more professional, and they've gotten more organized. And so I think that makes it, bigger problem than it's ever been. And there's more tools available, like I was saying before, these developer tools and these bot as a service networks. And so, we're definitely seeing an increase. And I would say probably the most concerning change we saw year over year was the increase in account takeover. So that grew by about 148% year over year. And account takeover is pretty directly linked to fraud, right? And so just to kind of give you a sense of what that is, I mean, that's basically, you hear about these data breaches that seem to happen all the time. Essentially these credentials are harvested and sold. And then what ends up happening is these bot operators essentially try these credentials on a bunch of different websites because people reuse passwords, even though they're not supposed to. And so we see a lot of that. And then we also just see a lot of brute force dictionary attacks and password guessing and stuff like that. And so once the ATO attack is successful, if it's successful, there's a lot to be gained. A lot of times, these attacks are carried out against financial institutions. So there's high stakes involved.
Now, tell me, is it changed anything in what they do? I mean, you said they become more sophisticated to find. Are they affecting different verticals that maybe they weren't affecting years ago? Are they doing things that we didn't think they were going to get to do? Are they passing the Turing test?
Yeah, I would say that probably the biggest takeaway for us is just that this account takeover problem isn't actually a vertical specific problem. I mean, we're seeing ATO essentially hit all industries. Really, anybody that has a login page is potentially subject to an ATO attack. I think we're also seeing a lot of inventory scalping, essentially, where when you have like a hot product release, bots coming in and buying up the inventory and reselling it at a higher price. That's a pretty common problem. And then payment fraud, where you have bots essentially taking credit card data that they acquired on the dark web, and maybe they have the credit card number, but they don't have the postcode, or they don't have the CCV, and so they'll randomly try those until they get it. So definitely seeing a lot of, and one of the other things that we see a lot is just a correlation between the incidence of these data leaks and then a subsequent rise in ATO. And so that's something to watch out for if you're a practitioner. You just need to keep your guard up whenever these big breaches happen.
So it's as with many things, when we think of technology, there are multiple teams responsible for multiple things, and each in their own wheelhouse. They do what they think they need to, and we often don't properly connect app development with app security, with security operations. And so a lot of what we talk about here seems to be traffic oriented. And I'm just wondering, are there things organizations need to do at the build phase? Because I know much more wider use of APIs, right? And the cloud, and certainly mobile continues to grow. And I'm just wondering if the complexity of that ecosystem of things may make it more difficult to understand how the bots are working as they present themselves. May not just be a network thing, and maybe a connection between the three APIs that still looks like a human driving, but maybe not. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you bring up a few good points. I think definitely mobile, the rise of mobile and API have definitely increased the attack vector, but they also present new opportunities to secure access to this data. So, for example, a lot of the travel agents and the travel industry use still price scraping kind of primitive bot-based price scraping, for example, in order to get airfares and other pricing information. And with APIs, you could actually implement that as a secure API call, right, with a key that's exchanged between you and your authorized clients. So that's kind of a benefit of some of these technologies. Same with mobile. If you're using a mobile application, we offer an Imperva, for example, an SDK that you can use to, when you develop your application, to secure it from bot misuse. And so there are, I guess it's kind of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's enhanced the surface area, but on the other, it's provided new opportunities to secure. But you're right. It really is. This problem has really become more than just an IT operations problem, or even really more than a security problem. I think if you think about the impact to business, you have all the things that you would probably think of, right? You have the increasing network and compute and all that these bots create. But then you also have things like creating friction for users, right? Because when you're trying to detect whether someone is human or not, you often see captchas being used, right? So you've got that cost. You've got lost revenue when competitors are undercutting your your prices. You've got skewed marketing analytics, right? Because a lot of these bots are coming in, looking at, say, some items in terms of retail items, seeing what their price is, and then leaving the page, not completing the transaction, obviously, because they're a bot. So that skews marketing analytics and things like that. And so it's very difficult, to know, what's going on if you don't have accurate conversion information. So it really is a multi-stakeholder problem. And then you've got fraud, right, and chargebacks and customer churn and all that's associated with these sorts of attacks. So it's the cost on society is really high.
I'm just gonna say all of my online purchases were done by a bot. Can I not pay, please?
Yeah, unfortunately, they tend to not. Well, a lot of them actually don't follow through and make the purchase. In fact, you see a lot of denial of inventory. So sometimes these bots will come in and basically put a bunch of stuff in the cart, which makes it unavailable, right, to a real legitimate person. And so then that person has to go to a competitor's website to complete the transaction. So some really interesting tricks we see out there.
Yeah, I'm glad that you went there, because I'm scrolling through the report and I see some interesting, almost curious thing, like bots enrolling in college. Do they actually graduate, or is like?
I think they drop
that is
out.
the other, I mean, and then what kind of legal action? What kind of legal action can you do? I mean, what's the relationship there with the business? Because we do know that it is a business to use these kind of attacks, right? I mean, the cyber criminals are well organized. They have marketing, they have operation. It's a service, as you say there. So what's the answer there that can be done? I mean, can you bring some example where they're really disrupting the business in a certain way?
Yeah, so I mean, just to kind of touch on that, bots enrolling in college, kind of what we saw there. So this was an education customer of ours, and they found ultimately that there were a bunch of bogus students that enrolled in several classes. And basically the reason for it was during the pandemic, the government offered some grants to students as a form of relief. And so basically these criminals were signing up for classes that they didn't intend to take in order to siphon some of those funds away. And then the other things that they were doing was they were creating obviously these .edu addresses that you get as part of signing up, and then reselling those because with that comes discounts to various services and things like that. And so Marco, you talked about, well, I think you kind of were touching on the fact, is this legal, right? I mean, this doesn't sound like it should be legal. And obviously, the act of fraud itself is illegal, but the these bots, themselves are kind of existing in this legal gray area, and so the law is not going to protect you. And I think that's kind of the message that we've gotten as we've seen some of the the courts adjudicate on some of these cases, and so you need technology and you need good design to be able to protect yourself.
So Ryan, I'm curious how the conversations go with some of your customers. Is it they see something interesting and they want your advice on what is it? Is it a bot, or is it some other, I guess, malicious software that does make it a bot? I don't know where the line is drawn there, but do they come to you and say, we're losing money, or we see weird activity, or our app is in the midst of a denial of service, so our customers can't engage with us, interact with us? Or what do those conversations sound like to help our audience understand, okay, we might see something similar, maybe didn't know what it was or who to ask and what to ask?
Yeah, so a lot of times we end up getting calls, and the customers see essentially a spike in activity on their login page in many cases, right? And oftentimes, this is the account takeover attack taking place. That's a very very common one. So just in general, traffic spikes, I would say, are kind of the number one concern that they have, and they ask us to dig into the cause. Others are maybe a little bit more subtle. And we were talking about how this is really a multi-stakeholder problem. Sometimes it'll be marketing, or the e-commerce team will notice that, for example, the conversion rate on their products has gone way down. In the travel industry, they call it the look to book ratio. And it's basically, the number of people who looked at an offering, right, an airfare, and, to the number that actually converted and bought it. And so, marketers of all, in all industries, use those types of conversion ratios to see how competitive their offering is, how well it's taking. And these get all out of whack when bots are coming in and not actually converting. So that's another big one. We had a customer recently in the financial, basically in the payment industries, noticing that there was, these guys issued gift cards, that basically they could tell there was a bunch of gift card fraud taking place, and they couldn't understand, where it was coming from. Was it humans? Where was it kind of, or was it bots? So it tends to be some sort of, increase in the rate of something, But as I was saying before at the onset of the call, we see a lot more low and slow too, because the cyber criminals are catching on. Those are the harder ones.
Wow, it is a much larger problem than what I think what you can even wrap your head around. And Sean, here's the problem.
Did our 2 bots on this double to 4 already?
Probably. That's what I'm thinking, because we're already running out of time here in this conversation, and I feel like we should probably talk more about this. So, Sean, any idea? Should we do another episode?
I think we need to keep going with Ryan. I think another session to understand a little more how these things work. Some more stories from the field, from customers really tackling this problem.
And maybe some ideas on how to take care of this.
I think that's a really important thing to get into, because as Ryan noted, it's not just security and not just IT. So I think we need to understand what the different roles are, the stakeholders, who they are, and the role they play in identifying and addressing this. So I think for now, Marco, let's cut here. And Ryan, if you're good with that, I think we covered a lot, right? What is a bot? How does it work? Why does it work that way? What's the impact to the business? And I think having that initial understanding, it goes a long way. And let's have another chat to dig into the rest of the stuff.
But we're not going to leave our audience without nothing to check, right? On the notes for this episode, they can find the link to learn more about the report. And they will find the link for other conversation that we had with Imperva. And of course, stay tuned because the big boss, Sean, said we can have another conversation about this, and we will. So stay tuned.
Well, we're still waiting for Ryan's approval.
This was a great conversation, guys. I'd love to continue it. So happy to be back.
Let's do that. Let's do it. So stay tuned. More to come.
We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you learned something new and this story made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.